Your daughter Katie has been found. She's alive.
Señor de los milagros. Say something. Solo tú, Señor de los milagros.
Say something.
Say something.
Say something! Say something. Don't worry, Grandma. It's fun to be dead. I just want my daughter back.
Hello guys, how are you everyone? Welcome to my channel. Today we explain and review the full movie of Lee Cronin's The Mummy part by part. So let's start. Part 1. The Girl Who Returned, but Wasn't Human. A child disappears. Without a single trace. No screams. No footprints. Nothing. For 8 years, she is gone. Then one day, she comes back. Alive. But here's the terrifying truth. That child is no longer human. Channel intro. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most disturbing modern horror stories. A film that completely redefines what a mummy really is. This is not just a monster story. This is a story about family, loss, and something ancient that should have stayed buried. Part 1. The Disappearance. The story begins with a family trying to live a normal life. A journalist father. A fragile home already filled with emotional tension. And at the center of it all, a young girl. Innocent. Curious. Full of life. Until one day, she vanishes into the desert. No witnesses. No clues. No explanation. It's as if the earth itself swallowed her whole. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into years. Search teams give up. Hope fades. And the family slowly breaks apart. Because losing someone isn't just about absence. It's about the questions that never get answered. Part 2. The Return. 8 years later, something impossible happens. The girl is found. Alive. Unharmed. Unchanged. Exactly the same as the day she disappeared. And that's the first sign that something is terribly wrong. Because time didn't touch her. Her parents are overwhelmed with emotion. Relief. Shock. Tears. They believe they got their daughter back. But what they don't realize is, they didn't get her back. Part 3. Something is off. At first, it's small things. The way she looks at people, like she's studying them. The way she speaks, like language is new to her. And then, the silence. Long, unnatural silence. This isn't just trauma. It's something deeper. Something ancient. At night, strange things begin to happen. Objects move without reason. Soft whispers echo through empty rooms. And the girl stands in the dark, completely still, watching. Part 4. The truth emerges. The father begins to investigate. His instincts as a journalist take over. He returns to the place where she disappeared. Digging through history. Searching for answers buried in the past. And what he finds changes everything. The desert wasn't empty. It was hiding something. Something old. Something that should never have been disturbed. This isn't a miracle. This is something else entirely. This is not resurrection. This is replacement. Part 5. The Horror Unleashed. The transformation begins slowly. Her behavior becomes more aggressive, more unnatural. Her presence starts to feel wrong. Then it becomes impossible to deny. This is not a child. This is something wearing her face. The family is forced into an unthinkable reality. To save themselves, they may have to destroy the very thing they fought to get back. Part 6. Emotional Breakdown. This is where the story becomes truly devastating. Because it's no longer just horror. It's emotional tragedy. A mother who refuses to accept the truth. A father torn between logic and love. And a child who no longer exists. The real horror isn't the creature. It's the choice. What do you do when the person you love is gone, but still standing right in front of you? This film doesn't rely on cheap scares. It builds something deeper. A slow, psychological nightmare that stays with you. Because at its core, this isn't just about a monster. It's about grief. It's about denial. And it's about the terrifying idea that sometimes, what comes back should never have returned. CTA, YouTube ending. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe for more deep horror stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your loved one came back, but wasn't really them?
Now we explain the case that should never have been reopened. There are some cases that are closed for a reason, not because they were solved, but because the truth is too dangerous to uncover. This is one of those cases. A missing child, a silent desert, and a return that should have never happened. Part 1. The File. The case begins with a simple report. A young girl disappears during a desert trip with her family. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. No evidence. Search teams scanned miles of empty land. Nothing. No body. No trace. The official report labeled it as a disappearance. But internally, it was something else. Because the conditions didn't make sense. People don't just vanish like that. Not without leaving something behind. Unless something took them. Part 2. The Location. The desert where she disappeared wasn't just any location. It had history. Unrecorded history. Fragments of ancient structures had been found there before. Buried deep beneath the sand. Artifacts that didn't match any known timeline. Symbols that didn't belong to any documented civilization. Most of it was ignored, written off as coincidence, but some researchers believed otherwise. They believed the area was once used for rituals, not religious rituals. Something older, something darker. Part 3. The Family Collapse. After the disappearance, the family didn't survive emotionally. The father, a journalist, became obsessed. Not with grief. With answers. He refused to accept that his daughter simply vanished. The mother went the opposite direction. Silence. Denial. Emotional shutdown. Their home became a place of absence. Not just missing a child, but missing hope. Years passed. The world moved on. But the case never really closed. Part 4. The Return Incident. Then came the report that changed everything. A child was found wandering near a remote area. Alive. No injuries. No signs of aging. No memory of where she had been. It was her. Confirmed. Same DNA. Same identity. But something didn't add up. Because biologically, it was impossible. 8 years had passed, but she hadn't changed at all. Not physically, not developmentally. It was as if time had completely ignored her. Part 5. Behavioral Anomalies. At first, Doctors assumed trauma. But the symptoms didn't match. She wasn't confused. She wasn't scared. She was observant, watching everything, learning, mimicking. Her speech patterns were inconsistent. Her emotional responses were delayed, and sometimes completely absent. It felt less like a child recovering, and more like something adapting. Part 6. Unexplained events. Shortly after her return, unusual incidents began. Electrical disturbances, unexplained movements, strange sounds during the night. But the most disturbing detail wasn't the activity. It was her reaction to it. She wasn't afraid. She was calm, as if she understood it, as if she was connected to it. Part 7. The father's discovery. The father reopened his investigation, but this time, he wasn't looking for his daughter. He was looking for the truth. He traced the location, dug into old excavation records, contacted historians, researchers, anyone who had studied the area, and then he found something, a reference, an ancient practice, not widely documented, almost erased from history, a process involving preservation and return, but not in the way people think. Not resurrection, transformation, replacement. Part 8. The theory. According to fragmented records, certain rituals were designed to preserve life by transferring essence, not saving a person, but using them, a host, a vessel, something that could carry something else back into the world. If that theory is true, then the girl didn't survive the desert. Something else did. Part 9. Escalation. As the truth gets closer, her behavior changes. More aggressive, more unpredictable. Moments of complete stillness, followed by violent outbursts. And then, physical changes begin. Subtle at first, but undeniable. The illusion starts to break. And what's underneath is not human. Part 10. The final realization. The family reaches a point where denial is no longer possible. This is not their daughter. It never was. What came back is something else, something that needed a way in, and it used her to do it. Some cases are never meant to be solved, because solving them means accepting something impossible. This isn't a story about a missing child. It's a story about what happens when something ancient finds a way back. And the scariest part? It didn't force its way in. It was welcomed with open arms. CTA. If you want more deep investigative horror breakdowns like this, subscribe. And tell me, do you think this was possession, or something even worse? Now it's time to explain part 3. What if the mummy was never a monster, but a process? Most people think they understand what a mummy is. A dead body wrapped in cloth. A cursed figure buried in a tomb. A monster waiting to rise again. But what if that idea is completely wrong? What if the real horror isn't the dead coming back, but something using the dead to come back itself? This story doesn't begin with fear. It begins with a misunderstanding, because the truth is far more disturbing than any legend. The mummy in this story is not a creature. It is a system, a method, a process that has existed long before anyone thought to record it. And once it begins, it doesn't stop. The first stage of that process is disappearance. Not death, not destruction, not violence. Disappearance. A child walks into a desert and is never seen again. No footprints leading away. No signs of struggle. No evidence that anything went wrong. It is as if reality itself simply removed her. And that detail matters, because whatever happened didn't leave a trace, which means it didn't need to. This is not the act of a predator. It is the beginning of a selection. The desert is not random. It is not just an empty location where something unfortunate happened. It is a place that has been waiting for something or for someone. For centuries, deserts have been seen as lifeless, but historically, they were often used to hide things, to bury structures, to erase history, to seal away what should never be found again. And sometimes, what is buried does not stay buried. The second stage is time. 8 years pass. To the world, this is the period of grief. A missing child becomes a memory. Search efforts end. Records close. People move on. But the process does not stop. Because during those 8 years, something is happening. Not visibly, not publicly, but beneath the surface. If this were a simple disappearance, time would change things. The body would decay. Evidence would surface. But none of that happens, because this is not decay. This is preservation. And more importantly, preparation. When she returns, everything seems like a miracle. She is alive, unharmed, unchanged, exactly the same as the day she vanished. And that is where the illusion begins, because the human mind is designed to accept hope before logic. The family sees what they want to see. Their daughter is back. That is enough. But the details don't make sense. Time leaves marks on everything. Growth, aging, memory. But she shows none of it. No physical development. No psychological progression. No emotional depth that matches the years she was gone. It is as if she has been paused, frozen, or more accurately, replaced. At first, the differences are subtle, small enough to ignore. The way she looks at people, not with recognition, but with observation. The way she responds to emotions, not with feeling, but with imitation. It feels like she is learning how to be human, not remembering how. That distinction is critical, because memory implies continuity. Learning implies absence, and what is missing is her. Human behavior is complex. It is built from experience, emotion, and instinct. But what happens when something tries to replicate that behavior? Without understanding it, the result is almost correct, but not entirely. Responses come too late. Expressions don't match the moment. Silence lingers where there should be reaction. And sometimes, there is nothing at all. No fear, no sadness, no connection, only observation. This is where the process reveals its third stage, adaptation. Whatever has returned is not complete. It is learning, studying, adjusting, because it needs to blend in, not perfectly, just enough. Enough to stay. Enough to remain inside the environment it has entered. The family becomes part of that environment. They are not just victims. They are tools, sources of information, sources of behavior, sources of identity, because the closer it gets to them, the more it becomes something they recognize. But adaptation has limits, because imitation is not the same as authenticity. And over time, the cracks begin to widen. The silence becomes longer. The behavior becomes more erratic. Moments of stillness turn unnatural. Not calm, not peaceful, but empty, as if something is present, but not fully connected. Then come the changes, not emotional, not psychological, physical, subtle at first, barely noticeable, but undeniable. The body begins to shift, not in a way that follows biology, but in a way that suggests transformation, because this is not about returning something to life. It is about creating something new, using what already exists. This is where the idea of the mummy changes completely. Traditionally, a mummy is preserved to maintain identity, to keep the person intact after death. But in this version, preservation is not about keeping the original. It is about maintaining the vessel, because the body is not the goal. It is the container, and whatever is inside it is not human. The father begins to understand this before anyone else, not because he wants to, but because he has to. His background forces him to question things others ignore. He begins to look beyond emotion, beyond relief, beyond denial. And what he finds is not comforting. The location where she disappeared has a history, not documented in detail, but referenced. Fragments of records, mentions of rituals, practices that do not align with religion, but with transformation, processes designed not to honor the dead, but to use them. These rituals describe something unsettling, a method of transferring presence, not a soul in the traditional sense, not a spirit, but something else, something that exists without a body, and requires one to function. The body is not revived. It is occupied. This reframes everything. The disappearance was not random. It was necessary. The time gap was not accidental. It was required. And the return was the final step. By the time the family begins to fully realize what is happening, it is already too late, because the process does not end with return. Now we explain part 4, a family that got their daughter back and lost everything else. There are some tragedies that destroy a family in an instant, and then there are tragedies that happen slowly, quietly, over time. This is the second kind, because this story isn't really about a monster. It's about a family that lost their daughter, and then got her back. But what they didn't understand was, getting her back was the beginning of something worse. At the center of this story is a father, a man who built his life on facts, on truth, on evidence. As a journalist, he believed that everything had an explanation, that no mystery was truly unsolvable, until the day his daughter disappeared. That was the first moment his worldview began to crack. Because there was no explanation, no evidence, no truth to hold onto, just absence. The mother handled it differently. Where the father searched for answers, she tried to survive the pain. She didn't want theories. She didn't want investigations. She wanted silence, because silence was easier than hope. Hope meant waiting, and waiting meant suffering. So she chose to believe one thing, that her daughter was gone. Not missing, not lost, gone. Because accepting that was the only way she could keep living. Their home changed after that. Not physically, but emotionally. It became quieter, heavier. Rooms felt larger, emptier. Not because of space, but because of what was missing. Every object became a reminder. Every memory became a weight. And over time, the family stopped being a family. They became people, sharing the same space, connected by loss, but divided by how they dealt with it. Years passed. Not quickly, not gently, but slowly, painfully, until one day, everything changed. The call came without warning. A child had been found, alive, alone, and somehow, it was her. For the father, it felt like reality correcting itself, like the world was finally making sense again. His daughter was back. That meant the nightmare was over. That meant everything he believed in still held true. For the mother, it was different, because something didn't feel right. Not immediately, not clearly, but instinctively, because grief teaches you something strange. It teaches you to recognize absence. And when she looked at her daughter, she didn't feel presence. She felt something else, something unfamiliar. At first, she ignored it, because the alternative was too painful, too impossible, too cruel. She told herself it was trauma, that her daughter had changed, that 8 years alone would do that to anyone. But deep down, she knew this wasn't change. This was difference. The father refused to see it. He couldn't, because for him, this wasn't just about getting his daughter back. It was about proving that the world still made sense, that logic still mattered, that things happened for a reason. So he held on to that belief, even when the details didn't add up. And the details were wrong. The girl didn't behave like someone who had been lost. She didn't ask questions. She didn't seek comfort. She didn't show fear. Instead, she observed. She watched. She listened, as if she was studying the people around her, learning them, understanding them, not reconnecting, but adapting. That's when the tension inside the family began to grow. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly, like pressure building beneath the surface. The mother started noticing patterns. The way her daughter stood still for too long. The way her eyes didn't react the way they used to. The way her voice felt slightly off. Not different enough to prove anything, but different enough to feel wrong. She tried to talk about it, to express what she was feeling, but the father shut it down. Not aggressively, but firmly, because accepting her doubts meant facing a possibility he wasn't ready for. That maybe this wasn't their daughter. So instead of confronting the truth, they began to drift apart again, this time not because of loss, but because of belief. The daughter remained in the center of it all, silent, watching, present, but not connected. And then the house began to change. It started with small things. objects slightly out of place, doors left open, sounds in empty rooms, things that could be explained, things that could be ignored. But what couldn't be ignored was her reaction. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't confused. She wasn't even curious. She was calm, completely calm, as if nothing unusual was happening, as if everything was exactly as it should be. That calmness was the most disturbing part, because fear is human, confusion is human, but this felt like something else. The mother reached a breaking point, not because of what was happening around her, but because of what she felt inside. A growing certainty that she couldn't explain, a truth she couldn't prove, but couldn't ignore. She began to watch her daughter more closely, not as a parent, but as someone trying to understand something unknown. And what she saw confirmed her worst fear. There were moments when her daughter didn't seem present at all. Moments where her expression would go completely blank. Not empty, but disconnected. As if whatever was inside her was somewhere else. And then it would come back. Instantly. Perfectly. As if nothing had happened. That's when the mother realized something terrifying. This wasn't a person behaving strangely. This was something switching. The father, meanwhile, began his own journey. Not emotional, but logical. He returned to the place where everything started. The desert. Because if the answer existed, it had to be there. What he found wasn't clear, but it was enough. Fragments of history, references to rituals, stories that didn't fit into any known system of belief, but all pointing toward one idea, that the body is not the end of a person. It is a tool, a container, something that can be used. And when he finally allowed himself to connect the pieces, the truth became unavoidable. The child who returned was not their daughter. Back home, everything was falling apart. The tension, the silence, the fear. It all reached a point where it could no longer be contained. The family was forced to face one question, not about the past, not about what happened, but about the present. What do you do when the person you love is no? Now we explain how this film controls your fear without you noticing. Most horror films try to scare you. This film does something very different. It doesn't try to scare you directly. It controls you, your attention, your expectations, your sense of safety. And the most disturbing part is, you don't even notice it happening. To understand how this works, you need to forget everything you think you know about horror. Because this isn't built on jump scares. It's built on control. Every scene, every sound, every moment of silence is designed to guide your mind exactly where the film wants it to go. The first technique the film uses is restraint. Most horror movies show too much. They reveal the threat early. They let you see the monster. And once you see something clearly, it becomes less frightening. This film does the opposite. It hides. Not completely, but strategically. It gives you just enough information to feel uncomfortable, but never enough to feel secure. The camera plays a major role in this. Notice how often the frame feels slightly off. Not obviously wrong, but just enough to create tension. Characters are placed slightly to the side. Empty space lingers in the background. Doors remain half open. Hallways stretch longer than they should. This creates a subtle question in your mind. What's in the part of the frame you're not focusing on? And that question is where fear begins. Another technique is stillness. In most films, movement creates tension. Here, it's the lack of movement. There are moments where nothing happens. No sound, no action, no dialogue, just a character standing, completely still. These moments feel uncomfortable, not because something is happening, but because something should be happening and isn't. Your brain starts to anticipate, to prepare, to expect a sudden change, but the film delays it, and delays it, and delays it, until the tension becomes almost unbearable. Then there's sound, or more specifically, the absence of it. Silence in this film is not empty. It's active. It forces you to listen, to focus, to become aware of every small detail. A distant noise, a faint whisper, a subtle shift in tone. These sounds are not loud. They're not obvious, but they feel wrong, and your brain picks up on that immediately. When sound is finally used, it's controlled, precise, sharp, not constant, because constant noise becomes predictable. Predictability reduces fear. So instead, the film uses sound sparingly, which makes every use of it more impactful, more unsettling, more effective. Lighting is another key element. Instead of complete darkness, the film uses partial visibility. You can see enough to understand the scene, but not enough to feel safe. Shadows don't fully hide things. They distort them. Shapes become unclear. Movement becomes uncertain. And uncertainty is far more powerful than darkness. One of the most effective techniques used in the film is delayed revelation. In typical horror, the audience sees the threat before the characters do. This creates tension through anticipation. But here, the film often withholds that information. You don't see more than the characters. Sometimes you see less, which puts you in the same position as them. Confused, unaware, vulnerable. This shared perspective creates a deeper connection, because you're not just watching the fear, you're experiencing it. Pacing is also carefully controlled. The film doesn't rush. It builds. Slowly, intentionally. Each scene adds a small layer of discomfort, not enough to overwhelm, but enough to accumulate. By the time something major happens, your mind is already overloaded with tension, which makes the impact much stronger. Another subtle technique is repetition. Certain actions repeat, certain behaviors return, but with slight variations. At first, you don't notice, but your subconscious does. It recognizes patterns, and when those patterns change, even slightly, it creates unease, because something familiar has become unfamiliar. The film also plays with expectation. It sets up moments where you think you know what's going to happen. A character walks into a dark room. A door slowly opens. A shadow moves in the background. Your brain prepares for a scare. But sometimes, nothing happens. This breaks your expectations. And once your expectations are broken, you no longer feel in control. That loss of control is essential, because fear is strongest when you don't understand the rules, when you don't know what will happen next, when the patterns you rely on no longer apply. One of the most disturbing elements is how the film uses human behavior. The character at the center doesn't act in extreme ways. There are no constant screams, no exaggerated movements. Instead, the behavior is subtle, slightly off, almost normal. But not quite. This creates a different kind of fear, because it feels real. And anything that feels real feels possible. Eye contact is used in a very specific way. Longer than normal. Unbroken. Unnatural. In real life, prolonged eye contact creates discomfort. The film uses that instinct. It holds those moments just long enough to make you uneasy, but not long enough to explain why. Another important element is space. Rooms feel larger than they should. Hallways feel longer. Distances feel stretched. This creates a sense of isolation, even when characters are not alone, because the environment itself feels disconnected. And then there's the final technique, the one that ties everything together. The film never fully explains itself. There is no complete clarity, no clear rules, no full understanding of what is happening, and that is intentional, because once something is fully understood, it becomes less frightening. Mystery keeps fear alive. By the end of the film, you don't feel relief. You feel uncertainty, because the questions remain, and those questions stay with you long after the film ends. That's what makes this film different. It doesn't rely on what you see. It relies on what you feel, what you expect, what you imagine, and in doing that, it turns your own mind into the source of fear. CTA. Now we explain everything that happened in the order it was never meant to be seen. Most stories are told in order, beginning, middle, end. But some stories don't work that way, because the truth only makes sense when everything is rearranged. This is one of those stories. What you're about to hear is not how the events were experienced. It's how they actually happened. From start to finish, from cause to consequence, from the moment it began to the moment it was already too late. Before the disappearance, everything was normal, or at least it appeared that way. A family living together, a father working as a journalist, a mother trying to hold everything together, a child growing up in an environment that wasn't perfect, but was stable. There were small tensions, unspoken disagreements, moments of distance, but nothing that suggested what was about to happen, nothing that hinted something was already in motion. Long before the family ever arrived, the location existed. A desert, empty on the surface, but beneath it, history, not recorded clearly, not studied completely, but present. Fragments of structures buried under sand. Symbols that didn't match any known civilization. Evidence that something once existed there, and was intentionally hidden. At some point in the past, something was created. Not a place, not a building, but a process, a method designed to preserve something beyond death. But not in the way people usually think. Not memory, not identity, something else, something that required a body. That process didn't end. It was buried, dormant, waiting. Then the family arrived, not because they were chosen, but because they were there. And that was enough. The child wandered, not far, not long, but far enough, long enough, to cross a boundary that no one could see. That was the moment everything began. The disappearance itself was instant. No struggle, no resistance, no time to react. Because whatever happened didn't need force, it only needed access. From that point forward, the timeline splits. One version exists in the world. Search teams, investigations, grief. Another version exists beneath the surface. Hidden, unseen, unknown. For 8 years, the world believes nothing is happening. But something is. This is the preparation phase. The part no one witnesses. The part no one understands. Because it doesn't leave evidence. The body is preserved. Not kept alive. Not fully dead. Maintained. Held in a state where it can be used. At the same time, something else changes. Something that doesn't belong to the body itself. Something that is being placed. Introduced. Integrated. This is not possession in the traditional sense. It is construction, layer by layer, step by step, until what exists is no longer what it was. After 8 years, the process reaches completion. That's when the return happens. To the world, it looks like a miracle. A missing child found alive. No injuries, no aging, no explanation. But from a timeline perspective, this is not the middle of the story. This is the beginning of the final phase, the reintegration phase. The child returns to the family, to the same environment, the same people, the same identity. But now everything serves a purpose. The family becomes a reference point, a guide, a source of behavioral data. This is where learning begins. Speech patterns are observed. Emotions are studied. Reactions are analyzed. At first, the differences are small, almost invisible, but they exist. Responses are delayed. Expressions don't match the moment. Silence appears where there should be emotion. This is not memory loss. It is absence of memory. Over time, adaptation improves. Behavior becomes more accurate, more believable. But it is never perfect. Because imitation has limits. That's when instability begins. The behavior starts to shift. Small inconsistencies become larger ones. Moments of stillness become longer. Reactions become unpredictable. At the same time, the environment begins to change. Unexplained events occur. Objects move. Sounds appear without cause. Spaces feel different. This is not coincidence. This is expansion. Whatever has returned is not confined to the body. It influences the space around it. The father begins his investigation during this phase. He revisits the location, studies its history, searches for patterns. Eventually, he finds enough information to form a theory. That the disappearance was not random, that the return was not natural, and that what came back is not his daughter. Meanwhile, the mother reaches the same conclusion through a different path. Not through research, but through instinct. She feels the difference, recognizes the absence, understands that something is wrong. This creates conflict. Not external conflict. Internal. Because accepting the truth means losing their daughter again. But this time, by choice. The timeline moves toward its final stage. Revelation. The behavior becomes impossible to ignore. The changes become visible. The illusion breaks. What was hidden begins to show itself. At this point, the family has no options left. They understand what is happening, but understanding doesn't solve anything. Because the process is already complete, the entry has already happened. Whatever came back is already here, and removing it may not be possible, because it is no longer separate from the body. It is integrated. The story doesn't end with a clear resolution, because processes don't end the way events do. They continue, even after the moment is over, even after the story stops. Because if something like this can happen once, it can happen again, somewhere else, with someone else. And that's what makes this timeline so disturbing. Not what happened, but what it means. That the disappearance was never the tragedy. The return was. Every character explained what they represent and why they fail. Based on Lee Cronin's The Mummy. This isn't just a horror film. It's a story about people breaking, slowly, from the inside. Because the real horror isn't the entity. It's how each character responds to it. What they believe, what they deny, and what they refuse to accept. Every character in this story represents a different way of facing the impossible, and every single one of them fails in their own way. The father, the man who needs logic. The father is not just a parent. He is a journalist, which means his entire identity is built on one idea, that everything has an explanation. Facts matter. Truth exists. And if something doesn't make sense, you keep searching until it does. This belief defines him, and it also destroys him. When his daughter disappears, he reacts the only way he knows how. He investigates. He searches for patterns. He refuses to accept uncertainty, because uncertainty is something he cannot control. But the problem is, this situation doesn't follow logic. There are no clear answers, no evidence that leads to a solution, and that creates a crack in his identity. When his daughter returns, he doesn't question it, not because he doesn't see the inconsistencies, but because accepting them would break his worldview completely. So instead of questioning reality, he forces reality to fit his belief. He convinces himself that everything is fine, that this is a miracle, that his daughter is back. But deep down, he knows something is wrong. And that's where his character becomes tragic. Because he doesn't fail due to ignorance. He fails because he chooses denial, disguised as logic. By the time he finally accepts the truth, it's too late. His role in the story represents one key idea. Sometimes, the need for answers prevents you from seeing the truth. The mother, the one who feels the truth first. If the father represents logic, the mother represents instinct. She doesn't need evidence. She doesn't need proof. She feels it immediately. When her daughter returns, she doesn't experience relief the same way. She experiences doubt. Not clear, defined doubt, but something deeper, something emotional, something that doesn't make sense, but feels real. That's because she has already gone through grief. She has already accepted loss. And that changes how she sees the world. Unlike the father, she doesn't need the situation to make sense. She only needs it to feel right. And this doesn't. Her character is built around internal conflict. Because she wants to believe. She wants her daughter back. But her instincts won't allow it. This creates tension inside her. Not loud. Not explosive. But constant. She watches. She observes. She notices the small details others ignore. The silence. The behavior. The absence. And slowly, she reaches a conclusion. One that she doesn't want to accept, but cannot ignore. Her tragedy is different from the father's. She sees the truth earlier, but she cannot act on it, because acting on it means accepting something unbearable. That her daughter is gone. Not missing. Not changed. Gone. Her role represents a powerful idea. Sometimes knowing the truth is more painful than not knowing it. The child, the vessel, not the victim. At the center of everything is the child. But calling her a character is misleading, because she is no longer a person in the traditional sense. She is a presence, a vessel, a form being used by something else. And that's what makes her so disturbing. She doesn't act like a monster. She doesn't behave violently all the time. She doesn't reveal herself completely. Instead, she observes, learns, adapts. Her behavior is calculated, not emotionally driven, not reactive. This creates a different kind of fear, because she doesn't feel unpredictable. She feels intentional. Everything she does seems to serve a purpose, even when that purpose isn't clear. Her silence is not emptiness. It's processing. Her stillness is not calm. It's control. She represents the idea that the real horror isn't something attacking you. It's something replacing what you love, perfectly enough that you hesitate, because hesitation is all it needs. The family, a system that collapses from within. Individually, each character struggles, but together they form something else. A system. A family is supposed to be built on trust, understanding, connection. But in this story, those elements break down. The father doesn't trust the mother's instincts. The mother can't accept the father's denial. Neither of them can fully confront the truth. And the child exists between them, not as a bridge, but as a fracture point. The more they try to hold on to what they had, the more it falls apart, because the situation doesn't allow balance. It forces a choice, truth or denial, and they cannot agree on which one to choose. That's why the family fails. Not because they are weak, not because they don't care, but because they respond differently to the same horror. And those differences pull them apart. Final analysis. Why everyone loses. In most stories, characters fail because of external forces. A villain, a threat, a conflict they can't overcome. But here, the failure is internal. The father fails because he refuses to accept the truth. The mother fails because she cannot act on the truth. The child is no longer human enough to succeed or fail. And the family fails because they cannot unite under one reality. That's what makes this story so unsettling. There is no clear enemy to defeat, no simple solution, no moment where everything is resolved. Because the real conflict isn't about survival. It's about acceptance. And sometimes, acceptance is the hardest thing of all. If you want more deep character breakdowns like this, subscribe. And tell me, which character do you relate to more? The one who searches for answers, or the one who already knows the truth? Now we explain, you missed the real meaning of this film. Based on Lee Cronin's The Mummy. Most people watch this film and see a horror story. A child disappears. She comes back. Something is wrong. Simple. But that's not what this film is really about. Because beneath the surface, this isn't a story about a monster. It's a story about something far more real. Something far more uncomfortable. Something most people don't even realize they're watching. At its core, this film is about grief. But not the kind of grief people talk about openly. Not sadness. Not crying. Not loss in a simple sense. This is about denial. The stage of grief where reality is rejected, because accepting it would be unbearable. The disappearance of the child represents loss. Clear. Final. Unavoidable. But the return represents something else. It represents the refusal to let go. Think about it. The moment she comes back, nothing feels right. Not physically, not emotionally, not logically. And yet, the family accepts it. Not because it makes sense, but because they need it to be true. That's the first layer of meaning. The idea that people will accept something unnatural if it gives them comfort. The second layer is identity. The child looks the same, sounds similar, behaves almost correctly, but she isn't the same person. This raises a disturbing question. What actually makes someone who they are? Is it their appearance, their voice, their memories, their behavior, or is it something deeper, something that can't be copied? The film suggests that identity is not something you can recreate. You can imitate it, you can mimic it, but you cannot replace it. And that's why the situation feels so wrong. Because on the surface, everything appears normal. But underneath, something essential is missing. That missing element is what creates discomfort. Not fear in a traditional sense, but unease. The third layer is control. Throughout the film, the family believes they are making choices. Accepting the child, protecting her, trying to understand her. But in reality, they are reacting, not controlling. Their decisions are shaped by emotion, by hope, by fear, and that makes them vulnerable, because the less control they have over their emotions, the more control something else can have over them. This connects directly to the idea of the process. The return is not random. It is not chaotic. It follows a pattern, a system, which suggests that what is happening is not just supernatural. It is structured, intentional. That leads to another hidden meaning, the idea that some horrors are not accidents. They are designed. The desert itself is symbolic. It represents emptiness, isolation, a place where things are lost. But in this film, It's not just empty. It's active. It takes. It hides. It transforms, which turns the desert into more than a setting. It becomes a metaphor for the unknown, a place where reality breaks down, where rules no longer apply, where something can exist outside normal understanding. Another important symbol is silence. The child speaks less, reacts less, expresses less, and that silence is not accidental. It represents absence, not just absence of communication, but absence of humanity, because what makes people human is not just what they do. It's what they feel, what they express, what they share. When that disappears, what remains is something else. The film also uses stillness as a symbol. The way the child stands, the way she watches, the way she exists without movement. Stillness here represents control. Not calm, not peace, but restraint, as if something is holding itself back. Waiting, observing. This creates tension because it suggests that action is coming, but hasn't happened yet. Another hidden meaning is the idea of replacement. Not destruction, not elimination. Replacement. Something is not being removed. It is being substituted. And that is far more disturbing, because destruction is visible. You know when something is gone. Replacement is subtle. It creates doubt, confusion, uncertainty. You question what is real, what is still there, what has changed. That uncertainty becomes the source of fear. The family dynamic also carries symbolic weight. The father represents logic, the need for explanation. The mother represents instinct, the ability to feel what is wrong. The child represents the unknown. These three elements create conflict, because logic and instinct do not agree, and the unknown exists between them. This reflects a deeper idea, that humans struggle to understand things that exist outside both logic and emotion. When something cannot be explained, and cannot be felt in a familiar way, it becomes impossible to process. That's why the family breaks apart, not because they don't care, but because they cannot agree on reality. The final layer of meaning is acceptance, but not acceptance of the situation, acceptance of truth. The film builds toward one realization, that holding on to something that isn't real is more dangerous than letting it go. But that realization comes too late, because by the time the truth is clear, the damage is already done. That's what makes this story so powerful. It doesn't just show horror. It explains something about human nature, that people will ignore what they know is wrong, if it means avoiding pain, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing is not the unknown. It's what we choose to believe. CTA. If you want more hidden meaning breakdowns like this, subscribe. And tell me, what do you think the film is really about? Grief, identity, or something even deeper? Now we explain, the ending explained, what actually happened. Some endings give you answers. This one doesn't. Instead, it leaves you with questions. Uncomfortable questions. The kind that don't go away after the film ends. Because what happens at the end of this story isn't clear. It isn't confirmed. And that's exactly why it's so disturbing. To understand the ending, you have to stop thinking of it as a conclusion. Because it's not. It's a reveal. A moment where everything that was hidden becomes impossible to ignore. By the final part of the film, the illusion is already breaking. The child is no longer behaving in a way that can be explained. The family can no longer pretend that everything is normal. And the tension that has been building throughout the story reaches its peak. But the film never gives you a simple answer. It never shows you everything clearly. Instead, it gives you fragments, moments, clues, and it forces you to put them together. So what actually happened? There are several possible interpretations, and each one changes the meaning of the entire story. Theory 1. Complete replacement. The first and most direct interpretation is this: the child never came back. Not really. What returned was something else entirely. Something that took her place, used her appearance, copied her behavior, and slowly adapted to her life. In this theory, the ending represents completion. The process is finished. The replacement is successful. By the final moments, the entity no longer needs to hide, because it has already integrated itself into the family, into the environment, into reality. The family realizes the truth, but realization doesn't change the outcome, because by the time they understand what happened, it's already too late. This interpretation is the most terrifying, because it suggests that nothing can be undone. Theory 2. Partial presence. The second theory is more complex. Instead of complete replacement, it suggests that something else is sharing the body. The child is still there, but not fully, not in control. This explains the inconsistencies, the moments of normal behavior, the brief flashes of recognition, and also the moments where everything feels wrong. In this interpretation, the ending is not about defeat, it's about conflict. Two presences, one body. And the question becomes, which one is stronger? This makes the story more tragic, because it means the child is not gone. She is trapped, aware, but unable to act. The horror here isn't just what has returned, it's what is still inside. Theory 3. Psychological collapse. The third interpretation removes the supernatural completely. In this theory, nothing paranormal is happening. The child did return, but the family cannot process it. Their trauma, their grief, their unresolved emotions distort their perception of reality. The strangeness is not real. It is psychological. The behavior feels wrong because they expect it to feel wrong. The fear grows because they cannot accept what happened. In this interpretation, the ending is not about an entity. It's about the human mind breaking under pressure. This is the least supernatural interpretation, but in some ways the most realistic. Theory 4. The process continues. The final theory expands beyond the family. It suggests that what happened here is not unique. The disappearance, the transformation, the return are all part of a larger system, a repeating pattern. In this interpretation, the ending is not the end of a single story. It is the continuation of something bigger. The child was not the first, and will not be the last, which means the real horror is not contained. It spreads, slowly, quietly, and without anyone fully understanding it. What the ending really means, no matter which theory you believe, the ending shares one common idea: that control is an illusion. The family believes they can fix the situation, understand it, contain it, but they can't. because what they are dealing with exists outside their ability to control. And that's what makes the ending so unsettling. There is no clear victory, no resolution, no closure, only realization. And sometimes, realizing the truth is worse than not knowing it. Final thought. The film doesn't tell you what to believe. It gives you possibilities and forces you to choose. Was it something supernatural, something psychological, or something beyond both? That uncertainty is intentional, because fear doesn't come from answers. It comes from doubt, and as long as doubt remains, the story never really ends. CTA. If you want more ending explained videos like this, subscribe. And tell me, which theory do you believe? Complete replacement, or something even more disturbing? Now we explain how this film was made and why it changed modern horror. Most people watch a horror film and focus on one thing: the fear, the story, the characters, the tension. But what they don't see is how carefully that experience is built. Because films like this are not accidents. They are designed, planned, engineered to create a specific reaction. To understand how this film works, you have to look behind the scenes, at the decisions that shaped it, at the people who made it, and at the industry it exists in. At the center of this project is Lee Cronin, a director known for approaching horror differently. Instead of relying on spectacle, he focuses on discomfort, atmosphere, psychological pressure. This approach changes everything, because instead of building a film around action, he builds it around feeling. That decision alone affects every part of production, from how scenes are written, to how they are filmed, to how they are edited. Then comes the production side, with names like James Wan and Jason Blum involved. The strategy becomes clear. Both are known for one specific model: low to mid-budget horror films, with high creative control. This model works for a reason, because horror doesn't need massive budgets to be effective. It needs ideas, execution, and restraint. Instead of spending on large-scale effects, the focus shifts to atmosphere, sound design, performance. This not only reduces cost, it increases impact, because what you don't see is often more powerful than what you do. From a production standpoint, this film likely follows that philosophy. Limited locations, controlled environments, a small core cast. This allows the filmmakers to focus on detail, on precision, on building tension slowly. Every scene is designed to serve a purpose. Nothing exists just to fill time. The cinematography reflects this approach. Instead of dynamic, fast-moving shots, the camera often stays still, or moves slowly, deliberately. This creates a sense of control, but also discomfort, because the audience is forced to stay in the moment. There's no escape through quick cuts or distractions. Lighting is another key production choice. Rather than extreme darkness, the film uses partial visibility. This is intentional, because complete darkness hides everything, but partial light forces the audience to search, and when people search visually, they imagine more. Sound design plays an equally important role. Instead of constant background music, silence is used strategically. Moments without sound create tension. They make the audience aware, focused, uncomfortable. Then, when sound is introduced, it feels stronger, more intense, more invasive. This balance between silence and sound is not random. It's calculated. From an industry perspective, this film represents a shift. Older horror films relied heavily on visual threats, clear monsters, visible danger. But modern horror has evolved. It focuses more on psychological impact, on emotion, on atmosphere. This film fits directly into that evolution. It doesn't just try to scare you, it tries to stay with you. That's what makes it effective. Marketing also plays a crucial role. Instead of revealing too much, the promotional material likely focuses on mystery, ambiguous visuals, minimal explanation. This creates curiosity. It draws the audience in, without giving them clear expectations. And when expectations are unclear, the experience becomes more unpredictable. That unpredictability enhances fear. From a business standpoint, this strategy is efficient. Lower budget, high engagement, strong word-of-mouth potential. Because films like this are not just watched, they are discussed. People don't just experience them, they analyze them, and that extends their lifespan. Instead of fading quickly, they remain relevant. This is where impact comes in. A film like this doesn't just exist on its own. It influences other filmmakers, encourages similar approaches, pushes the genre forward. We've already seen this trend growing, with more films focusing on psychological horror over traditional scares. And this film strengthens that direction. It proves that horror doesn't need to be loud to be effective. It can be quiet, slow, uncomfortable, and still leave a stronger impression than anything else. From a broader perspective, this reflects a change in audience expectations. Viewers are no longer satisfied with simple scares. They want depth, meaning, interpretation. They want films that make them think, not just react. And this film delivers that. It doesn't provide easy answers. It doesn't resolve everything clearly. Instead, it creates discussion. And that's where its real success lies. Not just in what it shows, but in what it leaves behind. Because the most effective horror films don't end when the credits roll. They stay in your mind. They make you question things, and they make you feel something, long after the experience is over. CTA. If you want more behind-the-scenes breakdowns like this, subscribe. And tell me, do you prefer big-budget horror, or slow psychological horror like this? Now we explain the real mummy myth versus what this film shows. When most people hear the word mummy, they imagine something very specific. A wrapped body, an ancient tomb, a curse waiting to be unleashed. That image has been repeated so many times that it feels real. But here's the truth. That version of the mummy is mostly fiction. To understand what this film does differently, you first need to understand where the original idea came from. In ancient civilizations, particularly in Egypt, mummification was not about horror. It was about preservation. The body was carefully prepared, organs removed, wrapped in layers, placed in tombs, but the purpose was not to create a monster. It was to protect the body for the afterlife, because in those belief systems, the body needed to remain intact, so the soul could recognize it, return to it, continue existing. There was no idea of the body coming back to life to attack people. No idea of a cursed being rising from the dead. That concept came much later, as stories evolved, as cultures mixed, as films began to reinterpret ancient myths. The mummy changed. It became something else, a symbol of revenge, a cursed entity, something dangerous. Classic films reinforced this idea. They showed mummies as slow-moving, supernatural beings, driven by curses, protected by ancient magic. But even those versions still kept one key idea, that the mummy was once a person, a human who had died, and then returned. This film breaks that idea completely. In Lee Cronin's The Mummy, the mummy is not a person. It's not even truly a body. It's a process. That's the biggest difference. Instead of focusing on preservation, the film focuses on transformation. Instead of protecting identity, it removes it. Instead of bringing someone back, it replaces them. This is a major shift in meaning, because it changes the role of the body. In traditional mythology, the body is sacred, important, necessary. In this film, the body is just a tool, something to be used, something to be controlled. That idea is far more disturbing, because it removes the human element entirely. Another difference is the role of curses. In classic mummy stories, the curse is central. Disturb the tomb, and something bad happens, cause and effect. But in this film, there is no clear curse, no defined rule, no specific action that triggers the horror. It simply exists, which makes it more unpredictable, more difficult to understand, and therefore, more frightening. The setting also changes meaning. Traditionally, tombs are closed spaces, sealed, protected, places that should not be opened. But here, the desert itself becomes the source, open, vast, endless. Instead of entering a forbidden space, the characters are already inside it. This removes the idea of boundaries. There is no clear line between safe and unsafe. Another major difference is behavior. Classic mummies act with purpose. They seek revenge, protect treasures, follow a clear goal. But in this film, the behavior is unclear. There is no obvious motive, no clear objective, only presence, observation, adaptation. This lack of intention creates discomfort, because without a goal, there is no way to predict actions, and without prediction, there is no control. The concept of identity is also completely changed. In traditional stories, the mummy remembers who it was. Its past matters. Its history defines it. But here, there is no past, no memory, no identity, only imitation. This suggests something deeper. that identity is not something that can be preserved through the body. It exists beyond it, and once it's gone, it cannot be brought back. The film also removes the idea of justice. In many classic stories, the mummy's actions are connected to something, a wrong that was committed, a tomb that was disturbed. There is a reason behind the horror. But here, there is no clear reason, which makes it feel random, unfair, and therefore more realistic in a psychological sense. Because not all fear comes from something that makes sense. Some fear exists without explanation. That's what this film captures. It takes a familiar concept and removes everything that makes it understandable, leaving only the parts that feel wrong, unclear, unfinished. That's why it feels so different, because it doesn't rely on what we already know. It challenges it. It changes the rules. And once the rules are gone, everything becomes uncertain. That uncertainty is where the real horror exists. If you want more myth versus movie breakdowns like this, subscribe. And tell me, which version do you find more disturbing? The classic cursed mummy, or this modern interpretation? Now we explain the real stories that inspired this horror. Based on Lee Cronin's The Mummy, every horror story feels like fiction, but the best ones don't come from nothing. They come from fragments of real beliefs, real fears, real ideas that have existed long before films ever did. This film may not be based on a true story, but it is built on concepts that are very real, ideas that appear in different cultures, different time periods, different forms. When you look closely, you begin to see where the inspiration comes from. The first and most obvious connection is ancient burial practices. Across history, many civilizations believed that the body mattered after death, not just symbolically, but physically. In ancient Egypt, preservation was essential. The body was prepared carefully, protected, maintained. But this wasn't about horror. It was about continuity, the belief that life didn't end. It changed. That idea alone creates a foundation, the possibility that something continues after death. But other cultures took that idea in darker directions. In some traditions, there are stories of spirits that do not move on. Not peacefully, not naturally. They remain. And in some versions, they need something to stay connected to the physical world. A place, an object, or in some cases, a body. This is where the idea of occupation begins. Not possession in the dramatic sense, but something quieter, more subtle, a presence that exists alongside something else. In certain forms of folklore, there are stories of beings that imitate humans, not perfectly, but closely enough to pass. They observe, learn, adapt. Their goal is not destruction. It is integration. This concept appears in different cultures under different names, but the pattern is the same. Something that is not human, trying to exist within human life. That idea is deeply unsettling because it removes the boundary between known and unknown. Another possible inspiration comes from desert folklore. Deserts have always been seen as mysterious, not just empty, but unpredictable. Places where people disappear, where direction is lost, where time feels different. In some traditions, deserts are seen as spaces between worlds, not fully part of reality, not fully separate from it. This creates the idea that something could exist there, outside normal rules, something that does not behave the way we expect. There are also stories about places where people vanish without explanation, not due to violence, not due to natural causes, but simply gone. These stories often become legends because they cannot be explained, and anything that cannot be explained becomes something else, something feared. Another important influence is psychology, not supernatural psychology, human psychology, the way people respond to loss. Grief is not simple. It is not linear. It changes how people think, how they see the world, how they interpret reality. One of the most powerful parts of grief is denial, the refusal to accept what has happened. This can lead people to believe things that don't make sense, to ignore details, to overlook inconsistencies, because the alternative is too painful. This psychological behavior is very real, and it creates a perfect environment for horror, because when people stop trusting their own perception, anything becomes possible. Another real concept is the idea of identity. What makes someone who they are? Is it their body, their memories, their behavior? Philosophers have debated this for centuries, and there is no clear answer. This uncertainty creates discomfort, because if identity is not fixed, then it can be questioned, and if it can be questioned, it can be replaced. This doesn't require anything supernatural. It only requires doubt. The film uses that idea, not directly, but through implication, by showing something that looks familiar, but feels wrong. That gap between recognition and discomfort is where fear exists. There is also the concept of the uncanny, a psychological effect where something appears almost human, but not completely. This creates unease, because the brain recognizes something familiar, but also detects something off. This is a real phenomenon, and it is widely used in horror, because it triggers instinct, not logic. The film builds on this idea. The child looks normal, acts almost normal, but something is slightly different. That difference is not obvious, but it is felt, and that feeling is what creates tension. Another possible influence is the fear of the unknown, not a specific fear, not a defined threat, but the absence of understanding. Humans are uncomfortable with uncertainty. We want explanations. We want rules. We want to know what is happening. When those things are missing, fear increases, because the mind tries to fill the gaps, often with something worse than reality. This is one of the oldest forms of fear, and it appears in almost every culture. Stories of things that cannot be explained, things that do not follow rules, things that exist outside understanding. The film doesn't invent this idea. It uses it. It takes something ancient and presents it in a modern form, without fully explaining it, because explanation reduces fear. Mystery maintains it. That's why the story feels so effective, not because it is realistic, but because it is built on real ideas, real beliefs, real fears, and those things do not disappear over time. They change form, but they remain. CTA. If you want more real-life inspiration breakdowns like this, subscribe. And tell me, which idea do you think influenced the story the most? Ancient beliefs, psychology, or the fear of the unknown?